The alarm sounds filled the bridge of the alien ship Velthari like angry screams. Red lights flashed everywhere, making the metal walls look like they were covered in blood. Captain Thexel pressed his 4 hands against the control panel, trying to stop the shaking that ran through his entire body. "Engine failure in Section 7, Navigator Quelna called out from her station. Her voice was high and scared. "The main power core is overheating. We have maybe 1 hour before complete shutdown." Thexel looked at the star charts floating in front of him. They were in the Kepler 4I-42 system, far from any Federation outpost. The nearest help was 3 days away, even if they could send a message. But their communication array was damaged, too. "Send the universal distress signal," he ordered. "Use all available power. Someone might hear us." Quelna's tentacles moved quickly over her controls. "Signal sent, Captain. Broadcasting on all emergency frequencies." The ship shook again. Thexel could smell the burning metal from the lower decks. His crew of 12 was doing everything they could, but the Velthari was dying. The research mission that was supposed to last 6 months was ending after only 2 weeks. "Captain," the science officer called out, "the star charts show this system was marked as uninhabited. No known civilizations within 50 light years." Thexel felt his heart sink. The Federation had explored this region of space many times. If there was no one here to help them, they would drift in space until their life support failed. He had read reports about ships that were found years later, their crews long dead. Far away on the bridge of the human ship Soul's Pride, Admiral Jiwan sat in her command chair drinking coffee. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep from the control stations. Her crew was relaxed, going through their normal duties during a routine patrol mission. "Admiral," Communications Officer Unbi said, turning around in her chair, "I'm picking up something strange. It looks like a distress signal, but it's not using any human frequencies." Jiwan put down her coffee cup and walked over to Unbi's station. The young officer pointed at her screen, which showed wave patterns that looked different from anything they had seen before. "Can you decode it?" Jiwan asked. "Working on it now, ma'am. The computer is trying to match it against all known signal types." Yunbi frowned at her screen. "Admiral, this is definitely not human. The math is different, but it's clearly asking for help." Lieutenant Commander Minho looked up from his station. "Admiral, regulations say we should report unknown contacts to Fleet Command before taking action." Jiwan studied the signal data. In her 20 years of service, she had never seen anything like it. Earth had been sending signals into space for over a century, but they had never received an answer. Now, it seemed, someone was finally calling back. "How far away is the signal coming from?" she asked. "About 6 hours at maximum speed," pilot Do-hyun answered from the helm. "The source appears to be near the 4th planet in this system." Jiwan made her decision quickly. "Set course for the signal source, alert all ships in our group to follow, and send a message to Fleet Command telling them what we found." "Ma'am," Minho said carefully, "we don't know what we're flying into. This could be dangerous." "Everything in space is dangerous, Commander," Jiwan replied. "But someone is asking for help, and we're going to answer." On the alien ship, the crew worked desperately to keep their vessel alive. The engine room was filled with smoke, and the temperature was rising every minute. 2 of the engineers had passed out from the heat, and the others were close to following them. "Captain," Quelna said, checking her instruments, "I'm detecting movement in the system. 5 ships, heading our way." Thexel felt a moment of hope. Federation vessels? Quelna studied her readings more carefully. Her face changed from hopeful to terrified. "No, Captain. The energy signatures are unknown. And Captain, they're coming from the 3rd planet." Every crew member on the bridge turned to look at her. The 3rd planet was in the Federation database, but it was marked with red warnings. It was classified as a Class The Death World, the most dangerous rating possible. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants, and according to the data, it should not have any space-capable civilization. "That's impossible," the science officer whispered. "Death World species don't develop space travel. They die out before they can leave their planets." But the ships were real and getting closer. Thexel accessed the Federation database and read the file on Earth. What he saw made his blood cold. The planet was covered mostly in water, which was dangerous enough. But it also had extreme weather. deadly creatures, poisonous plants, and natural disasters that happened regularly. The gravity was twice what most species could handle. The atmosphere contained oxygen, which was highly reactive and toxic to many life forms. The inhabitants are called humans, he read aloud. They are carbon-based bipedal mammals. They consume other living creatures for food and have been in constant warfare for their entire recorded history. They are considered extremely dangerous and should be avoided at all costs. The bridge fell silent except for the alarms that continued to sound. Everyone knew the stories about Deathworld species. They were the monsters that parents used to scare children. They were supposed to be myths, not real things flying through space. "Captain," Quelna said in a voice that was barely a whisper. "They're trying to communicate with us." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they could see the approaching ships. They were dark and angular, built like weapons instead of research vessels. The lead ship was huge, easily 3 times the size of the Velthari. But what scared Thexel the most was how they moved. The ships flew in perfect formation, with no wasted motion. They moved like predators. "This is Admiral Jiwon of the human colonial fleet," a voice came through the communication system. The translator was working, but the voice sounded strange. It was calm and controlled, but there was something underneath it that made Thexel's skin crawl. "We received your distress signal. Do you require assistance?" Thexel looked around at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for him to make a decision that could mean life or death for all of them. The humans were offering help, but everything in the Federation database said that accepting help from Deathworlders was the same as asking to be killed, but their ship was dying. The engine core temperature was rising, and they had maybe 30 minutes before complete failure. If they stayed where they were, they would certainly die. If they accepted help from the humans, they might die, but they also might live. "This is Captain Thexel of the Federation research vessel Velthari," he said into the communication device. "We have suffered critical engine failure and request immediate assistance." "Understood, Captain," Admiral Jiwon replied. "We're moving to intercept. Prepare to receive our rescue teams." As the human ships approached, Thexel could see more details. The hulls were covered in scars that looked like battle damage, but the ships flew like they were brand new. The humans had been fighting wars in space, and they had survived. They had not only survived their death world, but they had brought their wars with them to the stars. "Captain," Quelna said quietly, "what have we done?" Thexel watched the human. Ships get closer and closer. Soon, the Deathworlders would be on his ship. He could only hope that the Federation database was wrong about humans being monsters. Because if it was right, his crew was about to face something much worse than engine failure. The Soul's Pride moved into position next to the alien vessel, and Thexel could see smaller ships leaving its hangar bay. The humans were coming, and there was no way to stop them now. Commander Haiyan checked her equipment one last time before boarding the shuttle. She wore a simple uniform with basic life support gear, nothing like the heavy environmental suits that most species needed for first contact missions. Around her, 4 other humans made their final preparations. "Remember," she told her team, "we don't know anything about their biology or culture. Follow standard first contact procedures, but be ready for anything." Dr. Tae-hyun looked up from his scanner. "Their ship's atmosphere is actually very similar to ours. Slightly higher nitrogen content, but we should be able to breathe it without problems." "That's unusual," Engineer Nari said, closing her toolkit. "Most alien atmospheres are toxic to humans. We got lucky." Lieutenant Commander Minho's voice came through their communication devices. "Shuttle team, you are clear for departure. The alien vessel has opened their docking bay for you." The shuttle flew smoothly across the empty space between the 2 ships. Through the small windows, Hien could see the alien vessel up close. It was beautiful in a strange way, with flowing curves and soft colors that reminded her of art more than engineering. It was completely different from the sharp, practical lines of human ships. "Their technology is definitely more advanced than ours," Nari observed, studying her readings. "But some of their systems look inefficient, like they never had to worry about resources or weight." On the alien ship, Captain Thexel waited in the docking bay with half his crew. They had all put on their protective gear, though none of them expected it to help much against Deathworlders. According to the Federation database, humans were strong enough to tear through most materials with their bare hands. Stay calm, he told his crew, though his own voice was shaking. Remember that they offered to help us. Maybe they are different from what the database says. Navigator Quelna stood beside him, watching the human shuttle approach. Captain, their vessel is so small. How can only 5 beings repair our engines? I don't know, Thexel replied, but we're about to find out. The shuttle landed gently in the docking bay, and the aliens watched as a door opened in its side. The first human to step out was smaller than they had expected. Commander Hyane looked around the docking bay with curious eyes, showing no fear at all. Behind her came 4 more humans, each carrying different types of equipment. Thexel was surprised by how normal they looked. The humans were bipedal as the database had said, but they didn't look like monsters. They were about the same size as his own species, though they moved differently. Their movements were smooth and controlled, like they were always ready to react to danger. Dr. Tae-hyun stepped forward and began making hand gestures. He pointed to himself, then to the aliens, then to the damaged areas of the ship. His meaning was clear. He wanted to help. They're trying to communicate, Quelna whispered. Thexel nodded slowly and pointed to himself, then to Dr. Tae-hyun. The human smiled, showing his teeth. According to the database, when predators showed their teeth, it was a threat display. But somehow, this didn't feel threatening. Dr. Tae-hyun pulled out a small device and began entering mathematical sequences. He showed the screen to Thexel, displaying simple equations and universal constants. Within minutes, they had established basic mathematical communication. Incredible, Quelna said softly. They're learning our number system faster than our own children do. While Dr. Tae-hyun worked on communication, Engineer Nari was already examining the damaged systems. She moved through the alien ship like she had been there before, pointing at broken components and nodding to herself. The aliens followed her nervously, amazed by how quickly she understood their technology. This coupling is burned out, she said, though the aliens couldn't understand her words yet. She showed them the damaged part, then pulled a tool from her kit. In a few minutes, she had created a temporary repair using materials from the alien ship itself. The aliens stared in shock as their secondary power systems came back online. Nari had fixed in minutes what their own engineers had been unable to repair in hours. How did she do that? One of the alien engineers asked. She doesn't know our technology. But Nari was already moving to the next problem. She seemed to understand the principles behind their systems, even though she had never seen them before. Her hands moved quickly and confidently, making connections. That shouldn't work, but somehow did. Dr. Tae-hyun had made progress with the language as well. Using the mathematical base they had established, he was beginning to translate simple concepts. The alien computer systems were helping, and soon they could exchange basic ideas. You help us, Thexel managed to say in broken human language. Yes, Dr. Tae-hyun replied. We help. You are safe. Commander Hyane watched the work proceed smoothly. The aliens were clearly intelligent and peaceful, nothing like the aggressive species that humans had imagined might exist in space. But she could see that they were also afraid of something. Ask them why they are scared, she told Dr. Tae-hyun. It took several minutes of careful translation, but finally Thexel was able to explain. Your world, dangerous. Database says humans are predators. Very dangerous. Dr. Tae-hyun looked surprised. Dangerous? We are helping you. Yes, Thexel said, confusion clear in his voice. Database wrong? Hyane realized what was happening. Somehow these aliens had information about Earth, and that information had scared them. She wondered what their database could possibly say that would make them so afraid. Meanwhile, Engineer Nari had reached the main engine compartment. The damage was worse than she had expected, but she had seen similar problems before. During her training, she had worked on ships that had been damaged in combat, in asteroid fields, and in solar storms. This was actually simpler than some of those repairs. I need to shut down the core for 20 minutes, she explained to the alien engineers through Dr. Tae-hyun. Can your backup systems handle that? The aliens looked at each other nervously. 20 minutes without main power would mean no life support, no gravity, and no communications. For most species, it would be dangerous or impossible. We cannot, Thexel said. Too dangerous for us. Nari thought for a moment, then smiled. No problem. We can work without life support. The aliens were shocked. Humans could survive for 20 minutes without life support? In the cold vacuum of space? This seemed impossible, but Nari was already preparing her equipment like it was a normal thing. You should probably move to your emergency stations, Hyun suggested through Dr. Taehyun. We'll take care of the repairs. As the aliens evacuated. The engine compartment, they whispered among themselves. These humans were definitely not normal. They could breathe alien air, fix unknown technology, and survive in space without protection. Maybe the database was right about them being from a death world, but it was wrong about them being monsters. Dr. Taehyun stayed with Thexel and Quelna, continuing to work on the language barrier. He was learning their words almost as fast as they could teach them, and he was teaching them human words in return. Your species? Thexel asked. How long in space? About 200 years, Dr. Taehyun replied. Thexel's face changed color. 200 years was incredibly short for space travel. Most Federation species had taken thousands of years to develop from first flight to interstellar travel. How had the humans done it so quickly? In the engine room, Nari and her team worked in conditions that would kill most aliens. The temperature was below freezing, there was no air to breathe, and radiation levels were dangerously high. But the humans seemed comfortable, talking to each other through their communication devices while they worked. This should do it, Nari said, connecting the last cable. Their engine design is actually pretty smart, more efficient than ours in some ways. She activated the repair, and immediately the ship's power systems came back to full strength. The lights brightened, the air circulation resumed, and the constant shaking stopped. On the bridge, Thexel watched his instruments return to normal. All systems were green. His ship was not only repaired, but it was running better than it had in months. How? He asked Dr. Taehyun. We are good at fixing things, the human replied simply. But Thexel knew it was more than that. These humans had accomplished something that should have been impossible. They had repaired alien technology, in alien conditions, in less time than it would have taken his own engineers to diagnose the problem. As the human team prepared to return to their shuttle, Thexel made a decision that would change everything. Wait, he said to Commander Hyun. You come to our ship. We talk more, learn more. Hyun looked at her team, then nodded. We would like that. For the first time in galactic history, humans and aliens were about to sit down together and really talk. Neither species knew it yet, but this conversation would change both of their civilizations forever. The conference room aboard the Soul's Pride was designed for human comfort, but Admiral Jiwon had tried to make it welcoming for their alien guests. The lighting was softer than usual, and the temperature was adjusted to match what the aliens preferred. Still, she could see that Captain Thexel and his two companions were nervous as they entered. Please, sit wherever you are comfortable, Jiwon said, gesturing to the chairs around the large table. Dr. Taehyun translated her words, and the aliens cautiously took seats across from the humans. Jiwon had brought her senior staff to the meeting. Lieutenant Commander Minho sat to her right, making notes on a digital tablet. Commander Hyun was there as well, along with Dr. Taehyun and Engineer Nari. The aliens had brought Navigator Quelna and their science officer Vexan. First, Jiwon said, let me officially welcome you aboard our ship. This is a historic moment for both our species. As Dr. Taehyun translated, Jiwon poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot that had been brought to the table. The aliens watched this simple action with obvious concern. Admiral, Thexel said carefully, what are you drinking? Coffee, Jiwon replied. It's made from ground beans mixed with hot water. Would you like to try some? Dr. Taehyun checked his scanner quickly and shook his head. I don't think that would be safe for them, Admiral. The caffeine content alone would probably be toxic to their species. The aliens looked at each other with worried expressions. Vexan spoke quietly to Thexel in their own language, then said, Your drink is poison? Only to you, Jiwon said, with a smile. To us, it's just a normal beverage. We drink it every day. This information clearly disturbed the aliens. They had been analyzing human behavior since the first contact, and everything they learned made humans seem more dangerous, not less. These beings regularly consumed substances that would kill most other species, and they acted like it was completely normal. "Tell us about your world," Quelna said, trying to change the subject to something that might be less frightening. Dr. Tae-hyun began explaining Earth's basic characteristics. As he spoke, the aliens' faces showed growing alarm. Earth had weather, systems that could destroy cities, oceans that covered most of the planet, and thousands of species that used poison, venom, or physical force to kill their prey. "The gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared," Dr. Tae-hyun continued, "and we have active volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, and seasonal changes that can vary by over 50 degrees. Vexan was taking notes, but his hands were shaking. "And your species survived all of this?" "We didn't just survive," Minho said. "We adapted. We learned to use the environment instead of fighting against it." Just then, the ship's communication system announced that it was time for the daily combat training session. Through the conference room windows, the aliens could see into the ship's gymnasium, where human crew members were practicing hand-to-hand combat. Pilot Do-Yun was sparring with another crew member, and the aliens watched in horror as the two humans struck each other with enough force to break bones. But instead of falling down injured, the humans continued fighting, seeming to enjoy the violence. "Are they trying to kill each other?" Thexel asked in alarm. "No," Ji-won replied calmly. "They're training. We practice combat to stay ready for emergencies." "But they are hitting each other very hard," Quelna observed. "That's the only way to train properly," Hyane explained. "If we don't practice with real force, we won't be ready when we need those skills." The aliens found this concept difficult to understand. Most Federation species avoided violence entirely, settling disputes through discussion and compromise. The idea of deliberately hurting each other for practice seemed barbaric. Do-hyun finished his sparring match and noticed the aliens watching. He waved cheerfully and walked over to the conference room, still breathing hard from the exercise. His uniform was torn, and he had a cut on his cheek that was bleeding. "Hello," he said to the aliens through the translation system. "Sorry if we scared you. We were just having some fun." "Fun?" Vexan asked weakly. "Sure," Do-hyun replied. "Combat training keeps us sharp and helps us work together as a team. Plus, it's good exercise." The aliens noticed that Do-hyun was not concerned about his injuries. He wiped the blood from his cheek with a cloth and continued talking like nothing had happened. To them, this was proof that humans had incredibly high pain tolerance, another sign of their death world origins. "Perhaps we should show them the garden," Dr. Tae-hyun suggested, thinking that plants might be less frightening than combat training. The ship's garden was located on Deck 7, and it was one of Ji-won's favorite places. The room was filled with plants from Earth, carefully maintained by the crew. As they entered, the aliens were immediately impressed by the beauty and variety of the growing things. But as Dr. Tae-hyun began explaining the plants, the aliens' admiration turned to terror once again. "These are roses," he said, pointing to some flowering bushes. "They're very popular on Earth, though you have to be careful of the thorns." "Thorns?" Quelna asked. Dr. Tae-hyun showed them the sharp points that covered the rose stems. "They're defensive structures. Most Earth plants have some way to protect themselves from being eaten." As they moved through the garden, the aliens learned that many of the beautiful plants were actually deadly. The tomatoes were related to poisonous nightshade. The peppers contained chemicals that could cause severe pain. Even the innocent-looking potatoes were toxic if eaten raw. "Your plants are weapons," Thexel said in disbelief. "Not really," Engineer Nari replied. "They're just trying to survive, same as everything else. We learn to work with them instead of against them." The tour continued to the ship's medical bay, where Dr. Yeon-jun, the chief medical officer, was treating crew members who had been injured during the combat training. The aliens watched as he stitched cuts and bandaged bruises with efficient, practiced movements. "Do your people get injured often?" Vexan asked. "Every day," Dr. Yeon-jun replied matter-of-factly. "Space is dangerous. Equipment breaks. People make mistakes. Accidents happen. We just fix what we can and keep going." One of the injured crew members, a young woman named Hana, was getting treatment for a dislocated shoulder. She chatted with the doctor while he worked. showing no signs of distress despite what should have been considerable pain. "Does it hurt?" Quelna asked her. "Sure," Hana replied with a shrug. "But it's not that bad. I've had worse." The aliens were beginning to understand that humans had a completely different relationship with pain and danger than any species they had ever encountered. Things that would be considered serious emergencies in Federation space were just everyday inconveniences to humans. During their tour, the aliens also learned about human history. Dr. Tae-hyun showed them pictures and videos from Earth, explaining how humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that had destroyed entire civilizations. "Your species has been to war with itself?" Thexel asked. "Many times," Jiwon replied honestly. "For most of our history, different groups of humans fought each other over resources, territory, and ideas." "But you stopped fighting?" "Not exactly," Minho said. "We learned to fight together against common enemies instead of fighting each other. It took a long time, but we eventually figured out that cooperation was more effective than conflict." The aliens were trying to process this information when the ship's alarm suddenly began sounding. It was not the same urgent wail they had heard on their own vessel, but a steady, controlled tone that indicated a potential threat. "Admiral," Combat Controller Jinwoo's voice came through the communication system. "We have multiple contacts, approaching from hyperspace. Large vessels, unknown configuration." Jiwon stood up immediately, her relaxed demeanor changing to one of focused intensity. "Excuse us," she told the aliens. "We have a situation to deal with." The aliens followed, the humans to the bridge, where they could see the tactical displays showing 5 large ships emerging from hyperspace. The vessels were dark and angular, built for war rather than exploration. "Can you identify them?" Jiwon asked. "Yes, ma'am," Jinwoo replied grimly. "Kethvar Hunter Fleet, 3 heavy cruisers, 2 destroyers. They're scanning our position." Thexel felt his blood turn cold. The Kethvar were the most feared predator species in the galaxy, known for enslaving or destroying any civilization they encountered. If they had tracked the Velthari here, it could only mean they wanted the research data that his ship was carrying. "Admiral," he said urgently, "you must leave immediately. The Kethvar are extremely dangerous. Your ships cannot fight them." Jiwon looked at the tactical display, studying the approaching vessels. 5 ships against 5 ships. The odds aren't too bad. "No," Thexel said desperately. "You don't understand. The Kethvar are the apex predators of the galaxy. They have never been defeated in battle." Jiwon smiled, and for the first time, the aliens saw something in her expression that reminded them of the database warnings about Deathworlders. It was the look of a predator who had just spotted its prey. "Well," she said calmly, "there's a first time for everything." The Bridge of the Soul's Pride transformed instantly from a place of peaceful exploration to a center of military precision. Red lights replaced the normal white illumination, and crew members moved to their battle stations with practiced efficiency. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans prepared for combat with calm determination instead of panic. Admiral Jiwon stood at the center of the bridge, studying the tactical displays that showed the approaching Kethvar fleet. The enemy ships were massive, each one larger than any human vessel. Their dark hulls were covered in weapon ports and armor plating that spoke of countless battles. "Communications," Jiwon ordered. "Send a message to the Kethvar fleet. Tell them they are entering human-protected space and should withdraw immediately." Communications Officer Yunbi worked at her station for a moment, then shook her head. "No. Response, Admiral. They're ignoring our transmission." Captain Thexel approached Jiwon with desperate urgency. "Admiral, please listen to me. The Kethvar have conquered dozens of worlds. Their technology is far advanced, and their warriors are bred for battle. You cannot defeat them." "We'll see," Jiwon replied calmly. She turned to Lieutenant Commander Minho. "Battle analysis." Minho studied his instruments and began his report. 5 enemy vessels, displacement roughly 3 times our individual ship size. Energy readings suggest heavy shielding and advanced weapon systems. They're moving in standard Kethvar attack formation. "Weaknesses?" Jiwon asked. "Their formation is too rigid," Combat Controller Jinwoo observed from his station. "They're used to fighting enemies who retreat or surrender quickly, and their ships are built for intimidation as much as combat. probably not as maneuverable as they could be. Navigator Quelna listened to this analysis with growing horror. The humans were talking about the most dangerous predators in the galaxy like they were solving a simple puzzle. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no sign that they understood how much danger they were in. "Admiral," she said desperately, "the HFY have never been defeated. They have fought the Federation's strongest fleets and won every time." Dr. Taehyun translated her words, and Ji-won looked at her with interest. "Never been defeated? That's unfortunate for them." "Why?" Quelna asked, confused. "Because it means they don't know how to handle losing," Ji-won replied. "They've probably never had to adapt their tactics or learn from mistakes. That makes them predictable." On the main screen, the HFY fleet was getting closer. The lead ship was enormous, bristling with weapons and covered in scars from previous battles. As they watched, the alien vessels began to spread out, preparing to surround the human fleet. "Incoming transmission," Yunbi announced. "The HFY commander wants to talk." "Put him through," Ji-won ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a HFY warrior. He was larger than any being the humans had ever seen, with thick armor covering his body and weapons built into his hands. His face was designed for intimidation, with sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. "I am War Commander Thakvol of the HFY. Hunter Fleet," the alien said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "You will surrender the Federation vessel and its data immediately, or we will destroy all ships in this system." Ji-won studied the HFY commander for a moment, then smiled. "I'm Admiral Ji-won of the Human Colonial Fleet. This is human space, now, and these beings are under our protection. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Thakvol's expression changed to one of amusement. "Humans? I have never heard of your species. You have 5 small ships against my hunter fleet. Surrender now, and I may allow some of you to live as slaves." "I don't think so," Ji-won replied calmly. "Last chance to withdraw peacefully." The HFY commander threw back his head and laughed, a sound that was more like a roar than human laughter. "You amuse me, little human. I will enjoy breaking your ships apart piece by piece." The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent for a moment. Then Ji-won turned to her crew. "All ships, battle formation Delta, weapons to full power. Let's show these hunters what real predators look like." The 5 human ships moved into a complex formation that the aliens had never seen before. Instead of staying together for mutual protection, they spread out in a pattern that seemed to invite attack from multiple directions. "What are they doing?" Vexon asked in panic. "They're making themselves vulnerable." But Dr. Taehyun was watching the tactical display with growing understanding. "No," he said slowly. "They're setting a trap." The HFY fleet moved in for what they expected to be an easy victory. Their massive ships had destroyed countless enemies, and these small human vessels looked like they would be crushed in the first exchange of fire. War Commander Thakvol gave the order to attack, confident that the battle would be over in minutes. The HFY ships opened fire with weapons that could reduce planets to rubble. Energy beams and projectiles filled the space between the fleets. But something went wrong immediately. The human ships moved like living things, dodging and weaving through the attack with impossible speed and agility. Weapons that should have destroyed them completely missed by margins so small they seemed like luck. "How are they moving like that?" Thakvol demanded of his crew. "No ship can change direction that quickly." But the humans were not finished surprising him. As the HFY weapons finished their first volley, the human ships opened fire in return. Their weapons were smaller than the HFY guns, but they were incredibly accurate. Every shot hit exactly where it was aimed, finding weak points in the enemy armor that should have been impossible to target. Lieutenant Yuna controlled the weapons systems on the Soul's Pride with deadly precision. Her fingers moved over the controls like she was playing a musical instrument, sending energy beams exactly where they needed to go. Around her, other crew members worked with the same focused intensity. The first HFY destroyer took severe damage to its engine section and began spinning out of control. The crew couldn't understand how such small weapons had penetrated their heavy armor. "Impossible," Thakvol snarled. "Focus all fire on their command ship. Destroy it now." The entire HFY fleet turned its weapons on the Soul's Pride, sending enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. But Admiral Jiwan had anticipated this move. "All ships, execute Maneuver 7, she ordered calmly. The human fleet performed, a complex dance through space, each ship moving in perfect coordination with the others. They used the gravitational field of the nearby planet to change direction at angles that should have been impossible, while simultaneously launching their own attacks on the Kethvar vessels. Pilot Do-yun was flying his fighter squadron through the battle like they were performing an air show instead of fighting for their lives. His pilots followed him through maneuvers that pushed both ships and crews to their limits, but they never hesitated or made mistakes. "How do they fly like that?" one of the Kethvar gunners asked his commander. "The G-forces should be killing them." But the humans continued their impossible flight patterns, always staying one step ahead of the Kethvar weapons. Engineer Nari was working frantically to keep all systems running under the stress of combat, making repairs even as the ship shook from near misses. On the alien research vessel, Captain Thexel and his crew watched the battle in amazement. The humans were not just fighting the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, they were winning. Their smaller, supposedly inferior ships were dancing circles around the massive Kethvar fleet. "I don't understand," Quelna whispered. "How are they doing this?" Dr. Tae-hyun had been studying the battle carefully, and he was beginning to see the pattern. "They're not fighting like any species we know," he said. "Most civilizations develop space combat from their experience with planetary warfare. But humans, they learn to fight in 3 dimensions. The battle continued, and it became clear that the Kethvar were in serious trouble. 2 of their ships were badly damaged, and they had not managed to inflict any significant harm on the human fleet. War Commander Thakvol was becoming desperate. "All ships, ramming speed," he ordered. "We will destroy them with our hulls if necessary." The Kethvar vessels abandoned their formation and charged directly at the human ships, intending to use their superior size and mass to crush their enemies. It was a tactic that had worked many times before against other species, but Admiral Ji-won had been waiting for exactly this move. "Now," she said quietly. Suddenly, space around the Kethvar, fleet filled with small objects that had not been there before. The humans had been seeding the battle area with mines and automated weapons during the fight, creating a trap that was now springing closed. The charging Kethvar ships ran directly into the minefield, and explosions erupted all around them. Their heavy armor, designed to protect against energy weapons, was not effective against the kinetic impacts of the mines. At the same time, the human ships opened fire with everything they had. But instead of trying to destroy the enemy vessels, they targeted specific systems, engines, weapons, and life support. It was precision shooting that required incredible skill and knowledge of alien technology. Within minutes, the entire Kethvar fleet was disabled. Their ships drifted helplessly in space, unable to fight, unable to run, and unable to call for help. War Commander Thakvol stared at his dead instruments. The space around the disabled Kethvar fleet was filled with debris and the glow of emergency lights from the crippled ships. War Commander Thakvol sat in his command chair, staring at screens that showed the complete destruction of everything he had believed about Kethvar superiority. His hunters, the most feared warriors in the galaxy, had been defeated by beings they had never heard of. Admiral Ji-won's voice came through the communication system again, patient but firm. "War Commander, I need your response. Will you surrender?" Thakvol looked around his bridge at his crew. Many of them were injured, and all of them were in shock. In their entire history, the Kethvar had never been in this position. They were the ones who demanded surrender, not the ones who gave it. What are your terms?" he asked, his voice much quieter than before. "Simple," Ji-won replied. "Your crews will be transferred to holding facilities on our ships. Your vessels will be secured and searched. Any slaves or prisoners you're carrying will be freed. You'll be transported to Federation space for trial." "Trial?" Thakvol was confused. "You're not going to kill us?" There was a pause, and Thakvol could hear discussion in the background on the human ship. Finally, Ji-won responded. "No. We don't kill prisoners of war unless they force us to. That's not how humans do things." This concept was completely foreign to the Kethvar. In their culture, defeat meant death or slavery. The idea that enemies would spare them and even give them medical care was impossible to understand. On the bridge of the Soul's Pride, Captain Thexel and his crew watched the aftermath of the battle with amazement. The humans were moving between the damaged HFY ships in small shuttles, not to finish them off, but to provide medical assistance and rescue stranded crew members. "I don't understand," Navigator Quelna said to Dr. Tae-hyun. "Why aren't they destroying the HFY ships? This is their chance to eliminate their enemies completely." Dr. Tae-hyun was learning that this question revealed something important about human nature. "Because they're not really our enemies," he explained. "They're just beings who made bad choices. Humans believe that most people can change if given the chance." Engineer Nari was leading one of the rescue teams, working to free HFY crew members who were trapped in damaged sections of their ships. Her team moved through the alien vessels with the same efficiency they had shown during combat. But now they were saving lives instead of taking them. "Careful with that support beam," she told her team as they worked to free an injured HFY warrior. "His leg is trapped, but I think we can get him out without causing more damage." The HFY warrior looked up at her with confusion and fear. He had expected to be killed or tortured, not rescued by his enemies. When Nari's team finally freed him and began treating his injuries, he couldn't understand what was happening. "Why? Do you help me?" he asked through the translation device. "Because you're hurt," Nari replied simply. "That's what we do." Throughout the disabled fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Human medical teams were working alongside Dr. Yeon-jun to treat injured HFY, regardless of how badly they had been hurt or what they had done in the past. The humans showed the same care for their former enemies that they would for their own crew members. Captain Seokjin was leading a team to search the HFY cargo holds, looking for prisoners or slaves. What they found there shocked even the battle-hardened humans. Dozens of beings from different species were chained in small cells, many of them barely alive after months or years of captivity. "Get medical teams down here immediately," Seokjin ordered, "and bring food, water, and blankets. These people need help now." Among the prisoners were several members of species that the humans had never seen before. There were tall, graceful beings with silver skin, small, furry creatures with large eyes, and others who looked like they might be made of living crystal. All of them were in terrible condition. As the human rescue teams worked to free the prisoners, Captain Thexel began to understand something important about the species he had met. The humans were not just powerful warriors, they were also protectors. They fought not for conquest or glory, but to defend those who could not defend themselves. "Admiral," he said to Ji-won, "may I ask you something?" "Of course," she replied, not taking her eyes off the rescue operations. "Why do you do this? Why do you help beings you don't even know?" Ji-won thought about the question for a moment. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "The galaxy is full of predators who take advantage of the weak. If we don't stand up to them, who will?" This answer revealed something that the Federation had never understood about Deathworld species. They were not just dangerous because they were strong or fast or clever. They were dangerous because they had learned to survive by working together, by protecting their communities, and by refusing to accept that might made right. Communications Officer Yunbi was coordinating with the other human ships to organize the transfer of prisoners and the processing of the HFY crew. It was a complex operation that required careful planning and execution. "Admiral," she reported, "Captain Park on the Busan Guardian says they found something interesting in the HFY database. Records of their raids, including attacks on Federation worlds." "Good," Ji-won replied. "Make sure we copy everything. The Federation will want this evidence for the trials." As the rescue operations continued, more details about HFY activities came to light. They had been raiding Federation space for decades, taking prisoners, stealing technology, and destroying any resistance they encountered. The research vessel Velthari had been tracked because it carried valuable scientific data that the HFY wanted to steal. Combat Controller Jinwoo was analyzing the tactical data from the battle, trying to understand how the HFY had been defeated so completely. What he found was that their tactics had been predictable and their formations rigid, exactly as the humans had expected. "They fight like they've never faced real opposition," he reported to Admiral Ji-won. "Every move they made was textbook, with no adaptation or creativity." "That makes sense," Pilot Do-hyun said, joining the conversation. When you always win easily, you never learn to handle a real fight. This observation highlighted a crucial difference between humans and most other species. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years, constantly adapting and improving their tactics. They had learned to expect the unexpected and to plan for every possible contingency. As the day continued, the human fleet processed hundreds of HFY prisoners and rescued dozens of slaves from different worlds. Medical teams worked around the clock to treat injuries and provide psychological support to beings who had suffered terrible trauma. Dr. Tae-hyun spent time with each group of rescued prisoners, learning their languages and helping them communicate with their rescuers. Many of them had been captives for so long that they had given up hope of ever being free. "Where will you take us?" asked one of the silver-skinned beings. "Home," Dr. Tae-hyun replied. "Wherever that is for you, we'll help you get there." The concept of being returned home without payment or obligation was foreign to many of the rescued beings. In their experience, freedom always came with a price, but the humans asked for nothing except the chance to help. As evening approached on the human ships, Admiral Ji-won called a meeting with her senior staff and the alien delegation. The conference room was much more crowded now, with representatives from several of the rescued species joining the discussion. "We need to decide what to do next," Ji-won said. "We have prisoners to transport, refugees to return home, and evidence of crimes to present to the proper authorities." Captain Thexel spoke up. "Admiral, the Federation Council needs to know about what happened here. They need to know about humans." "I agree," Ji-won replied. "This is bigger than just one rescue mission. The galaxy is about to change." Vexon, the alien science officer, had been quiet for most of the day, but now he asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What will humans do now? Will you claim territory, demand tribute, establish an empire? Ji-won looked around the room at the various alien species represented there. "We'll do what we've always done," she said. "We'll explore, we'll learn, and we'll help those who need it. The galaxy is big enough for everyone." But even as she spoke these words, everyone in the room knew that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. The HFY had been the apex predators for centuries, and now they had been defeated by a species that most civilizations had never heard of. Word of the battle would spread quickly through Federation space and beyond. Every species would want to know about the humans and their incredible capabilities. Some would want to be friends, others would want to be enemies, and many would simply want to be left alone. As the meeting concluded and the various beings returned to their duties, Captain Thexel approached Admiral Ji-won one last time. "Admiral," he said, "I want to thank you for everything you've done, but I also want to warn you, what happened today will have consequences throughout the galaxy. Are you ready for that?" Ji-won smiled, the same expression that had worried the aliens earlier. "Captain, we've been ready for this our whole lives. We just didn't know it yet." Outside the conference room windows, the stars shone with the same light they always had. But everything else had changed forever. 3 weeks later, the combined fleet of human and alien vessels approached the border of Federation space. The journey had been long but peaceful, giving both species time to learn more about each other. The rescued prisoners had recovered much of their strength, and even some of the HFY crew members had begun to understand that their captors were different from any enemy they had ever faced. Admiral Ji-won stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching the navigation display as they approached the rendezvous point. Federation ships were already waiting for them, a small fleet of elegant vessels that looked more like works of art than military ships. "Incoming transmission," Communications Officer Yunbi announced. "It's from the Federation flagship." "Put it through," Ji-won ordered. The main screen showed the bridge of a Federation vessel, where a tall, graceful being with blue skin and 4 arms was waiting. This was High Admiral Zephyra, one of the most respected military leaders in Federation space. "I am High Admiral Zephyra of the Galactic Federation Fleet," the alien said formally. "I have been sent to escort you to Federation Council chambers for formal first contact proceedings." "Admiral Ji-won of the Human Colonial Fleet," Ji-won replied with equal formality. "We're honored to meet you, High Admiral. We have prisoners to transfer and evidence to present regarding HFY activities in this region." Zephyra's expression showed surprise. Prisoners? We were told that you encountered a Kethvar hunter fleet. Are you saying that you captured them? We defeated them in battle and took the survivors into custody, Jiwon confirmed. We also rescued 63 prisoners from various species who were being held as slaves. The Federation admiral stared at the screen in disbelief. You defeated a Kethvar hunter fleet? That's impossible. No one has ever defeated the Kethvar in space combat. Lieutenant Commander Minho stepped forward with a data pad. We have complete tactical records of the engagement, High Admiral. We're prepared to share them with Federation military analysts. Captain Thexel appeared on the screen beside Admiral Jiwon. High Admiral, I can confirm everything they say. I witnessed the battle personally. The humans not only defeated the Kethvar, but they did it while protecting my research vessel and minimizing casualties. Zephyra was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. The Kethvar had been terrorizing Federation space for generations. The idea that an unknown species had not only fought them but actually won was almost too incredible to believe. High Admiral, Jiwon said, we request permission to enter Federation space for formal diplomatic contact and prisoner transfer. Permission. Granted, Zephyra replied quickly. Please follow our escort ships to Council Station 7. The entire Federation Council is waiting to meet you. As the combined fleet moved into Federation space, word of their arrival spread rapidly through the communication networks. Every world, every species, every government in the Federation wanted to know about the humans who had done the impossible. Dr. Tae-hyun spent his time during the journey working with Federation linguists to establish better communication protocols. The Federation had developed universal translation technology over thousands of years, but human languages presented unique challenges. Your species has an unusual approach to communication, explained Dr. Velona, a Federation linguist with tentacles instead of hands. You use context, tone, and even facial expressions to modify meaning. Most species are much more direct. That's because we evolved as social hunters, Dr. Ta-hyun replied. We had to be able to communicate complex ideas quickly and quietly, often in dangerous situations. Engineer Nari was working with Federation technical specialists to exchange information about ship design and technology. The Federation engineers were amazed by human approaches to problem solving. Your repair techniques are completely unorthodox, said Engineer Kolesh, an insect-like being with multiple arms. You use materials and methods that shouldn't work, but somehow they do. We learned to make do with whatever was available, Nari explained. On Earth, resources are limited, so we had to get creative. Meanwhile, the rescued prisoners were being cared for by both human and Federation medical teams. Many of them were from species that the humans had never encountered, and their stories provided insight into the scope of Kethvar activities throughout the galaxy. Captain Seokjin interviewed many of the former prisoners, documenting their experiences for the upcoming trials. What he learned painted a picture of systematic brutality that had gone unchecked for far too long. They took me from my home world 5 years ago, explained Thaisa, one of the silver-skinned beings. My people tried to resist, but the Kethvar ships were too powerful. They destroyed our defense fleet in minutes. How many others were taken? Seokjin asked gently. Hundreds, Thaisa replied. Maybe thousands. They said we were valuable because we can survive in different atmospheres without protection. Stories like this were repeated by prisoner after prisoner. The Kethvar had been conducting raids throughout Federation space, taking people for use as slaves, soldiers, or worse. The Federation military had been unable to stop them because they could never match the Kethvar in direct combat. Combat Controller Jinwoo was working with Federation tactical analysts to review the battle data. The Federation officers were fascinated by human combat doctrine, which was unlike anything they had studied before. You fight in 3 dimensions simultaneously, observed Fleet Analyst Morden. Most species think of space combat as an extension of planetary warfare, but you treat it as something completely different. That's because space is different, Jinwoo replied. There's no up or down, no cover, no terrain to use for advantage. You have to create your own advantages through movement and positioning. As they approached Council Station 7, Admiral Jiwon received a priority message from Earth Command. Fleet Admiral Chen wanted a full report on the contact with alien civilizations and authorization for expanded exploration missions. Earth is very interested in the Federation, Admiral Jiwan told Captain Thexel. We've been alone for so long that the idea of joining a galactic community is exciting. The Federation will be very interested in humans as well, Thexel replied. What you've accomplished changes everything. The balance of power in the galaxy has shifted. Council Station 7 was massive, easily the size of a small moon. It housed representatives from hundreds of different species and served as the diplomatic center of the Federation. As the human fleet approached, thousands of beings watched from observation decks and communications centers. Pilot Do-hyun guided the Soul's Pride into the docking bay with perfect precision, despite the complex gravitational fields and traffic control systems. Federation flight controllers were impressed by the skill and confidence he showed while navigating completely unfamiliar systems. The formal greeting ceremony took place in the Grand Assembly Hall, a huge chamber designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of different species. Admiral Jiwan led a delegation that included her senior officers and Captain Thexel, who would serve as an advocate for human membership in the Federation. High Council leader Marikson, an ancient being whose species had founded the Federation thousands of years ago, spoke for the assembled representatives. We welcome the humans to our gathering, she said in a voice that carried the weight of centuries. We have heard remarkable stories about your capabilities and your character. We understand that you wish to join our Federation as equals, not as subjects or protectors. That's correct, Admiral Jiwan replied. Humanity seeks friendship and cooperation, not dominance or submission. We believe that all species can benefit from working together. Marikson gestured to the assembled representatives, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy. The Federation has existed for over 10,000 years based on the principle that cooperation is stronger than conflict. But we have never admitted a species from a class Thuthin Deathworld. Many of our members are concerned about what this might mean. Before Admiral Jiwan could respond, Captain Thexel stepped forward. High Council Leader, if I may speak. Of course. Captain, your testimony is why we are here. Thexel looked around the enormous chamber, then began to speak. 3 weeks ago, my ship was dying in empty space. We sent a distress call, expecting to die alone and forgotten. Instead, beings we had never met risked their own safety to save us. They repaired our ship, protected us from enemies, and asked for nothing in return. He paused, looking directly at Admiral Jiwan. Yes, humans are dangerous. They come from a world that would kill most of us in minutes. They are stronger, faster, and more adaptable than any species I know. But they are also the most compassionate beings I have ever encountered. They could have conquered us, enslaved us, or simply ignored us. Instead, they offered friendship. The chamber was completely silent as Thexel continued. The HFY have terrorized the galaxy for centuries because no one could stop them. Now someone can. But instead of using that power for conquest, the humans want to use it for protection. They want to be our guardians, not our masters. High Council Leader Marikson looked around the chamber, reading the expressions and body language of the various representatives. The Council will need time to deliberate on this matter. However, I believe I can speak for many of us when I say that any